Hi, my name is Matt Wallrath, and I serve as the Wisconsin First Detector Network Coordinator out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This video is going to talk a bit about how WIFDN, the Wisconsin First Detector Network, is training communities to report invasive species, ID them, and find resources for control. So stick with me for about 45 minutes as we go through and discuss how we can make a difference in our communities and train our neighbors and ourselves in reporting and controlling invasives. So this is our logo here. We work with both insects and plants. This will be a bit more plant focused, but we do things around the state that are with priorities, and we help set those priorities with your input. So don't be shy. Reach out to us as needed to get your new species up there, and if something looks weird, we'd like to know that and get it on the map. My lab is in the Wren's Weed Science Department here at the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences, which is now we are called the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences. So that QR code down there will take you to our website for the Wren's Lab. I focus on natural areas and invasive plants. So this is kind of our mission statement here, and you'll notice that it says community science, and that's you that I'm speaking to you right now watching this video. You are a community scientist. I'm a community scientist. We don't say citizen science anymore because that was something that was a little bit exclusive if you weren't in the country of origin. So if I go to Portugal and do community science, that's fine. Or if someone comes up here from Guam or whatever, it doesn't matter. So if you're doing the science, you're part of the community. So this is our main focus, is that education and providing volunteer opportunities for the public. So I'm all about coming from a forest health and regeneration standpoint. If you are a gardener, you might care more about your backyard garden and how invasive species will affect your crop or your flowers or whatever it is. We still have a similar tilt as far as we need to know what's out there so we can report it, and so we can control it if we feel it's important, and maybe tell our neighbors about the best ways to do so. And they work hand in hand. What happens in your garden does influence the forest, and what happens in the forest influences your garden or your prairie edge or whatever it is that you're treating to have for a high quality landscape, something that you can make some decisions on. And the real narrative for why invasives are so destructive is partially because they do slow down this forest health, and they stop the regeneration of our native species. When we'd like to see them coming up, we instead see these shrubby invaders and some things that are poisonous. So it's an important fight. My background comes in Conservation Corps. I've also owned a landscape company. I was part of the Washington Conservation Corps for 3 years. I helped form a youth conservation corps as well, and then I spent some time at the DNR. I have a master's in environmental conservation from the Nelson Institute. I've also worked for the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association as a program manager, and was a commissioner at the San Juan County Land Bank. You can call me Commissioner Wallrath if you would like to be formal about that sort of thing. So I've got a lot of experience in the field doing this sort of work, with getting my hands dirty, leading crews, and educating all kinds of audiences, from county supervisors on roads, to kids at a high school science camp, to retired master naturalists, all over the board. And I like to teach, so hopefully you find this to be informative. What is an invasive plant? When we're talking about it, I have a very distinct need to discuss how we use this word invasive, because people throw it around all the time. And we want to make sure that when we say that, we are aligned with what the state of Wisconsin means, so that we can make sure our language is correct. So here we go. These are kind of the traits that you're going to see, and these are right from the statute of Wisconsin, meaning that there is a rule, and it's going to affect the economic and environmental health, or our human health as well. So that's pretty broad. Those 3 factors cover a lot of how we think about plants and think about our well-being and our ability to make make a living and all that stuff. So, and people, of course, will say, well, what about, why is Dame's rocket considered invasive? You know, it's a pretty flower. So wouldn't it be nice to have that in your backyard? And if you were a farmer going to town and picked a handful of Dame's rocket back in the day, maybe maybe that was a good idea. But the reason it's considered that is because it does cause damage to our environmental health. So it's a mustard, and it's something that's going to outcompete our natives. So while it may be pretty, it has kind of a sinister background. Here's that statuette I was talking about, and you'll notice that there are a bunch, there's a bug behind my face. There are a bunch of different types of plants and animals on here, all the way from the swine, the resplendent swine, and jumping worms, snakehead carp. And we think of teasels and roses and other things. So we're lucky to have a rule in Wisconsin that is comprehensive across all types of species, from fungus that affects bats to water floating plants to your backyard, your thistles and whatnot. So again, here's the definition, very, very dry academic wording as you get into legislation that defines invasive species. Here it is again, chapter NR40. NR40 is gobbledygook. It doesn't really mean anything. It is something that is just the number that came up next, but again, it has all these definitions, and it mentions what we're going to say are viable organisms. So the way that we think about that is if you get a basket woven from water hyacinth is a prohibited plant. However, those dry woven baskets are not going to spread that plant. It is not viable. The same thing I like to say, no one's ever poured a can of gumbo into a river and had crayfish sprout out that I know of, because it's all pasteurized, it's heated. So the crayfish in there is not viable. However, if you were to move live crayfish, that is against the law. And best management practices is partially what I'm going to lay out here. As long as you're doing your best and following the rule, you're not going to get a ticket. It's people that are really kind of scofflaws are way out doing things that are selling invasive species or knowingly moving them around. That's when we get the wardens involved. In general, this is a rule with a lot of bark and not much bite. And so, no, you cannot report your neighbor's prohibited plants and they're going to get a ticket. Ideally, you speak to them pleasantly and explain to them why control is important, and maybe even share some tips for how to do so. Looking into examples of, so here's one that is wild parsnip, and it does not do much for our natives, but it is a harm to human health. So this causes second-degree burns. It's nasty. It's photodermatitis. So the sap gets on you from a cut plant, and it activates with the sun, and it will cause burns. So you deal with this stuff, wash off your arms. So that's going to cause harm to human health and going to cut down our ability to enjoy the edges of our parks and our prairies. How else do we define invasive species in the state? I'm one of the facilitators for the NR40 rule. I used to serve as the regulation specialist for this rule. And now I help convene groups of biologists and land managers, nursery owners, other people that have a stake in the health and also the economy of Wisconsin. And we look at what's out there, what's spreading, what's being a problem, what's maybe not as big of a problem as we thought. And we also use this book called The Vegetation of Wisconsin. So John Curtis wrote this, and in fact, he's named Curtis Prairie in the Arboretum here. It's a beautiful restoration site. So when he was going around and doing his research on ordination to say what occurred with what, he was using the survey lines from when the plots for the townships were drawn in Wisconsin. So the surveyor would go out to the various corners and they would put a stake down and they would make a note and say, well, the stake is underneath an oak tree and it's surrounded by all these different types of vegetation. And they were pretty good botanists, so they have pretty comprehensive lists of what was out there. We consider that to be what was here before settlement, before the plow when we took a lot of that biodiversity away. So if it's on that list, we say, okay, well, it's probably been here for a long time. We can also talk to our native indigenous tribes and use their knowledge of what's been around forever, what they've used in their traditions and in their forage and in their making of different types of commodities and household items for their people. So that's cool too. And so we also look at expert biology information from the DNR and other places around the region and say what is coming up, what is being a bad actor that we would like to keep from out competing our native stuff. This is a big take home for me today, that this ounce prevention really is worth the pound here. And if you look at the return on investment for every dollar spent me talking about this prevention and you cleaning off your tools, it's worth $100 it's 100 times at least of trying to get out there and actually remove invasive species. So if you clear off your mow deck and you don't move the stuff around, you're really doing yourself a favor versus wading into, on the left, this is invasive Phragmites, and it's a plant that gets 16 feet tall and very persistent, very massive underground root system. So take the time, do your due diligence, knock off your boots, clean your tools, and you will thank yourself later, and maybe your carpet will thank you as well. So that includes your dogs and your boats and all the things that are going to be out there in their environment. So when you move around from site to site, don't carry seeds and soil that can spread invasives. This is Wisconsin specific, and we have two classifications in our regulation. So the regulatory category here is something that we say is prohibited, and this is our most severe classification. So if you see here, it says you cannot possess the species. It is illegal to own it, move it around, have it in any way. And my example here is of kudzu, the vine that ate the south, and it is very bad. It is very prevalent. You can see it taking over this entire valley. Every plant you see here is kudzu, besides that maybe one tree in the background. It's climbing up the trees. It's climbing over everything else. So we've never seen this in Wisconsin, but if we did, it would be a big deal. And we want you to report that, and then we will be on emergency response, rapid response. We do not want kudzu to get established. It's also important to note that the severity is one thing, but the control and the feasibility is also very important. So something that could be really, really bad, for example, the knotweed complex, like Japanese knotweed, it's a very aggressive species. However, we're never going to eradicate it, so it doesn't fit this early detection and pioneer population status. Instead, it's going to be our other category, which is restricted. So restricted plants are invasive species in general. Could be insects, could be fungus. It is recommended for control, but it is not legally mandated. However, once it has a status, you cannot transport, transfer, or introduce, which means you can't trade it, you can't move it around. You can have it on your property, but you cannot actively get it out into the rest of Wisconsin. Again, now, if you do that, you're breaking the rules. And I have an example of someone who had round leaf bittersweet, which is a great Thanksgiving plant, and they had it in their wreaths, and they were selling it at their farm stand. Now, they could have it. They already had it in their back 40, so they could make that part of their cornucopia, but I had to go over there and say, hey, you're not allowed to sell this plant, because we don't want to move these seeds around and have this thing taking over the rest of Wisconsin. It's already out there plenty bad. So garlic mustard here is a great example of that. You can see big fields of it all over the place. Is it a problem? Sure. Are we going to eradicate it? I don't think so. In fact, it's physically almost impossible to do so. So we want to know that it's bad. We don't want to sell it, but we don't want to also overly emphasize controlling it necessarily versus prohibited stuff. So a lot of this, there's a lot of work to be done all the time in the state. And if we can't control every stand, we have to prioritize. I'll also point out that there is a Seek Alternatives note on here. So the Midwest Invasive Plant Network has an alternative guide for things that if you want fall color, you want a screen, you want a climbing vine, they recommend either native or non-invasive plants to go ahead and take care of that situation and for your yard and garden. So when I say non-invasive, again, I want to emphasize that just because something is exotic or not from Wisconsin does not make it necessarily an invasive species. It has to fit that harm to human health, the environment, or the economy. All right, let's think about how we're going to plan our work around invasive species. Here are our 5 steps that we'll go through. So if you're thinking about your back 40, your forest, you're thinking about your yard and your garden, you're going to want to do a little bit of research first, and maybe get some experts involved. Maybe ask your friends and your neighbors, your fellow master gardeners, whatever it is, about what you got. You want to know how big you got of an issue. You want to look at your techniques. You got to do it. No one else is going to do it for you, most likely. And then step 5 is very important. Follow up that monitoring effort and management. It's often a multi-year fight, so don't bite off more than you can chew. All right. Got some great tools here for looking at what's around you. So number 1 is just ID. You have to know what's out there in the first place. Number 2 is you can look at what's around you. So it's really good to get to edmaps.org and see if other plants like that have been reported in your area, or also asking your neighbors and other land managers. Like if this stuff is widespread, you're going to keep on getting seeds from a neighbor's house or keep on getting roots growing into your property. It's going to be harder to control than if it's just the one spot on the map that we know of that has this thing, and that actually kind of increases the priority that you might be able to eradicate it from your part of the state. Once you know what you got, you want to do some research on what you can do about it. And I'm here to represent the extensions part of the University of Wisconsin. So this is our website on the bottom there, rensweedscience.cal.wisc.edu, and you can go ahead and find different types of treatment for these different types of species. So what they're going to have is each one is going to have a how and when, as well as there can be a lot of different techniques discussed. So you can think about mechanical or chemical, maybe does burning work, what works for it. You're going to look at if it is herbicides, what is the rate, as well as the effectiveness. So we like to see something that has between 70 and 90% at least for second year, and then you're going to have to go back and retreat things. It's very rare that you're going to be one and done for invasive species because the seed bank is going to be there, or maybe that you didn't get every single stem. So this is a great way to build your knowledge of what's going to work. All right, you have to apply these techniques, right? So in the following slide, I mentioned that you want to know when to do it, and that's very important. The rates are very important. You can't, if you're going to do herbicides, do it when it's dry. And don't overspray. Don't think that more herbicide is better, because those rates have been tested for effectiveness, and we try to do the lowest amount that will be effective without being destructive to the surrounding plants and animals necessarily. There are always risks whenever you're using herbicides. They are poisonous. Usually we don't recommend anything that's above caution, but that being said, you do want to also wear your protection from either the roses with gloves or from the herbicide itself with some rubber gloves and some rubber boots. So do it in the time that is recommended, and then follow that up. So if you miss this one plant from 1 year, the next year can get really, really big. So if you have a plan, make sure you're doing this consistently. And I'll give you a tool later to see when you can actually notice the stuff that's going to be on the ground. Maybe it's falling, maybe it's really got a pretty leaf right now, so it's easier to spot, so that you can see if you missed it or you need to report it for the first time. This is all part of developing that invasive plant management plan. So control and adapt. And I do emphasize adaptive management. If you're listening to me today and you do some research and you say, oh, this is going to be great, this is supposed to work really well, and it doesn't, well, maybe you have a weird situation for how your soil works, or there are all kinds of things that could go wrong. So try something different. You can also let us know or reach out for another technique. So don't repeat the same mistakes. And often it's just because you didn't read the label quite correctly or didn't apply it at the right time. And I often get that where someone says, well, I did what you said, and it didn't work. And I say, well, did you spray it in the fall at this rate? They said, no, well, I sprayed it in the spring at this rate. It's like, well, read the directions that we give you. They're there for a reason. Here is my recommended tool for what we're pushing people towards in reporting their invasive species in Wisconsin. And really, it's actually great because it works around all of North America. So even Canada and Mexico. It's called EDMAPS, the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. So EDMAPS with 2 Ds, .org. I'm going to walk you through quickly how to set up a report. You will need to go to this page, edmaps.org, or you can get the app on your Apple or Android phone, and you can get registered on that as well on your smartphone. It's going to sync across both your smartphones and your computer. One account's all you need. And then you're going to be able to track your records and share them with your neighbors. And that's going to go across boundaries with a stable link with pictures that you took. So you don't have to have your own system of a database or a spreadsheet or a folder somewhere that has all this stuff. And that's why we recommend it highly, is that it's doing the project management and data management for you without you having to be a website expert. It's pretty neat, and it's becoming very popular as it gets better and better developed. In fact, Minnesota uses this almost exclusively for reporting stuff at their Department of Natural Resources level. And if you instead have another database or another thing you're doing, that's fine, whatever works. But will I ever see those records? Maybe not. But I see all of these records as they come across my desk. I actually help verify these, and I share them as appropriate with the managers that will help to manage them. So get public, don't be shy, use this app. It is professionally verified, so if you take a picture that's wrong, I'll look at it and I'll say, hey, you know what, that's actually this kind of knotweed, not that kind of knotweed, or are you sure that's not a native plant that looks just like it? And so we're here to help you as well. It's a great tool. So how do you do it? This is going to be first off with the PC version, the kind of like the web browser version. You are going to take your species of interest selected there, put in your date, obviously positive if you saw it. We do encourage negative reports as well, which you can just say, I didn't see this species, I thought I would. You can put in your habitat and the cover, the abundance, all that kind of stuff, and some of the bits of how it's, that's optional for plant description, but it's nice to know. What's really neat, and this is in the report sightings on this, you'll see this on the top. What's really neat is you can then draw a polygon with your mouse, or if on your phone, you can kind of double click and use your finger, and it does the location automatically for your latitude and longitude. It also does your acreage, overall size or square feet, which is better than me when I'm out in a valley being like, it's about 30 feet by 40 feet. No, that's not bad. But if I zoom in and I can tell you exactly where it is from this roadside to this bank, it'll do it for you without me having to estimate all the funny things. And you can make some kind of complex shapes and even multiple shapes for one report. And we encourage these polygons. You can see in the top of the map, there's like a point, a line, or a polygon. Polygons are great. Instead of making a record for every garlic mustard stem in your park, you could just make one polygon for a big infestation, and it saves everybody a lot of time. You can also do revisits on this. So if you go back and you treat it, you can note that, and you can change the size of the polygon appropriately. What's neat then is you will have a list of your records. Once they are in your dashboard, in your MyEdMaps, you can then see that they are there for you to share with your friends and neighbors, or maybe your park official, or whatever it is. So that record ID is going to be permanent, and if you were to click on that, it would take you to the page that is then stable. It has the photos you took, it has the information you entered, it has the location. So if you want to share and get someone driving directions to where you're at, it's really, really easy, or to where you saw this thing in the woods so they can go verify it themselves or treat it. It's just really nice to have this as a tool. So invasive species do not care about county boundaries. They do not care about where your fence line stops or where your property ends. They just care about where they can grow successfully. So this is a great way to kind of get over a bit of the information silos that happen between counties, between city officials, or other types of things. These are going to be available for anyone to look at in the public. They could also be private if you're more concerned about not having people poach something for some reason, but in particular, just if you're private about your land and you said, okay, well, I don't want everyone to know this necessarily, you can click the private button, and that will make it to a county-wide level, but it won't put a point on your property. We encourage you to be as public as possible because it really helps with our ideas of reporting and knowledge of what's happening in the state. However, if you decide that you want that privacy, that's totally acceptable. And on the same lines too, if you are reporting something on someone else's private land, please get their permission before you do so, out of respect. So you've got yourself a smartphone. There's two different flavors of EdMaps, and I use both. There's no reason you can't have both. If you're just starting, I would recommend you use the simple EdMaps, period. It's going to have more resources for you as far as ID, and it's easier to use. Now, EdMaps Pro is great. It is going to be more useful if you have offline areas. You don't have cell phone service. You can download maps ahead of time. You can also kind of see all the species around you at once if you download the data set that you can update. It takes a bit more time to set up, but if you go to the edmaps.org training page, they have in-depth walkthroughs and PowerPoints and PDFs and videos, kind of like this, about how to do all of that for your phone, depending upon what kind of phone you have. So don't be shy about EdMaps Pro if you need it and if you want to try it out, but I'd say start with EdMaps. This is also replacing a couple other regional apps. We used to use the GLEDN, the Great Lakes Early Detection Network app, but with the increase of power of cell phones, we now just use EdMaps because we can have one app that does everything versus having the guys at Bugwood in Georgia design all these different regional apps. So you went ahead and downloaded your app. Now you do want to go ahead and make sure you get yourself that login. Log yourself in, become a registered user. I think it's going to make it easier for you to report stuff into the system. And then also when I see it, if I know you and I say, oh, you know, I can look at your photos, we can communicate that way. If I say, well, this is the wrong thing, I can let you know that. If I say, wow, I've never seen this before, can you tell me more? I can, you know, and make sure you put those images in there. We do require images. So this is actually the guide section. There's an invasive species guide, the field guide. So this is going to be the field guide for honeysuckle. You can see pictures of it. You can see information about the how we describe it in the botanical sense. You can also see where it occurs in your region, and then you can make then you make that observation on the right. So that's when you get that field guide. You click on Wisconsin, and it's going to go ahead and get you the right list of species for our area. Here's some of the options here as we go through your home on your app. You can make a custom species list. So if you always report the same 10 things, just put them in there. It makes it easier to search. If you're on vacation, you can change your state, see what's around you. And again, that's how you're going to go ahead and get EdMaps login. Make that private. I recommend public. And then you're going to sync up across your desktop version as well. Field guide here is going to have all of these different species types, plants, insects, diseases, wildlife, and then you can therefore search through things. And this is also going to be where you make your sightings here. So you got your new sighting, you make a negative survey, like I said, which allows you to make a polygon where you didn't see something, which can be very useful as well. Because if you suspected you would see it, or maybe that's where it stops, and where you're saying, hey, I looked here, I didn't see it. That's valuable information. Once you're done, you got to make sure you hit that upload button. So it goes, maybe back on Wi-Fi at your house. So that goes into my inbox, and I'll look at it for you and verify it as needed. All right. So this is a kind of a brief shout out for one of our early detection species that we are seeing around Wisconsin. Part of my job is to make these fact sheets. This is something called ashy sunflower, which is in fact considered pretty native to, and in fact somewhat endangered in parts of Michigan. We've never seen it here before in Wisconsin until recently, and it seems to be taking over high quality prairies. We would not suspect we would have an issue with this, but we do. This is my call to action for you. Now, not just ashy sunflower. It looks a lot like a lot of other sunflowers that you're going to see out there, like rosinweed and whatnot. However, the whole thing about community science and what I'm here to ask you today, and here what I'm empowering you to do with EdMaps and whatnot, and my email address. I'm a public figure of sorts. No one else is walking in your back garden as much as you are, or no one else has walked for 50 years on the trails around your community. I have not walked around your trails for 50 years. I am 42 years old, so that is impossible. So your local knowledge of what is spreading and growing and whatever is new and perhaps aggressive can be really good. And maybe it's just what we would call an aggressive native, like sumac or something like that, that's just spreading in a newly disturbed area. But your knowledge of what's out there can really be super crucial for us to detect a new invader that we can then get into the queue for control and reporting before it becomes really, really widespread. Got some tools for you here. This is my website, the Wisconsin First Detector Network with extension, or WIFDN as we say, because I work for the state and we love acronyms. A couple different cool tools to show you. So my favorite one here is our calendar, when to look. It's the phenology calendar. And it's going to have these little Pac-Man symbols that are going to tell you what life stage it's in. And the more filled in that Pac-Man symbol is, the easier it is to see it. If it is blank, it is not detectable. So you're not going to see bishop scoutweed in January, but you will see it in flower in May and June and July, more or less. Now, these are, of course, dependent upon your region and the year and everything else. We put a lot of research into this to make sure these are correct, but there is always variability. So you can make your kind of specialized list of species. You can do it by month, which is great. If you're making a kind of a plan for what you're looking for in your garden, you can just turn on August and say, well, what's flowering right now that I might see? And that can give you some ideas for what is going to be detectable and reportable in your area. More close up here, again, just explains the life stages and detectability. And then the drop-down lists. You can make yourself a custom calendar, you can print that off and carry that around based upon your particular I guess, caution list or really even your habitats. So that is the Wisconsin Invasive Species Calendar. That's in the tools page on my website. Next up, we have the WIS-TIP Viewer, the Wisconsin Shared Terrestrial Invasive Plant Presence Viewer. Yes. And this is going to be a cool tool that if we update this every couple of months with reports from EdMaps. So it's Wisconsin specific. And what it allows you to do is to select a bunch of species that you care about, kind of check those boxes, and then you can zoom in on the map and you can see what's been reported around you. So it's a great way to wrap up all of your various reports that would come in through EdMaps. There actually are some legacy reports from previous databases that we put in there that may or may not be in EdMaps, so it's a bit more comprehensive. We're working right now to update all the stuff that's in this viewer that we've got from the DNR and other partners and make sure it's all in EdMaps so that they sync up. The EdMaps tool, if you go to the tools page, there's a query tool that also does a lot of this. That's a little more complicated to use, but actually more powerful. You can see across state lines, you can see multiple species, and you can adjust the amount of months or years that you're looking at records to. So this is a good place to start, though. So this is something we maintain in-house. Big goal is to have your folks out there, so say you have a construction project coming around the corner from your house, so you're putting in a new garden at your neighbor's property or your new house. You want to know what's out there, and you want to share that with people that have some say in the control and management of that. So I work a lot with knotweed, and so if you know the knotweed population, that stuff spreads through infrastructure, it spreads in gravel. You want to get that dot on the map so that people can look at it, and you maybe consider being that squeaky wheel that goes over and says, "Hey, foreman, are you aware that's a big spot of knotweed over there? Do you know that if you move that fill over to the other spot, it might punch through the foundation of your new hospital?" They might actually care about that and take managers' steps to control. So don't be shy. We're all here in this together. We all are stewards of the land in our own way, and sometimes just being knowledgeable is a really important first step. Online resources to look at. So you're going to see that AdMaps homepage. You're going to see my page there. So you're going to go ahead and see the DNR here. Wisconsin has for our invasive species organization, as well as the Friends We Lab Science that has those resource fact sheets and other kinds of videos and stuff. And of course, the coveted landscape alternatives. There's actually a flyer that has nicely laid out with different types of alternative plants to replace things you want for your garden functionality. I tell the story all the time of my mother is a landscape architect, and so she would recommend burning bush for many, many years, decades, as a plant to add some great color. It's bright red, it's kind of just striking. And when I got my job with the DNR and I told her that we didn't recommend that anymore, she's like, "Oh no, I've been screwing up." And you haven't done anything wrong. These rules have been in place since 2009, so they're more recent to some extent than you might suspect. They have been evolving over time. So really just update your list of species you recommend, update what you want to see in your yard, use native plants as much as possible, take care of those invasives in your yard. I believe in the Aldo Leopold land stewardship ethic. If you can do your little slice, and we all did that, it would make a big difference. If we can all teach someone else something, that even goes even further. Other resources. So here we have a map of the state as it contains what we call cooperative invasive species management areas. And you can get this at the IPAW website, ipaw.org. They'll have contacts for your part of the state, and there's going to be people that are thinking about these issues, providing funding, maybe tools, maybe just knowledge for other workshops around invasive species. So it's part of a community, and as an invasive species professional, I'll tell you, it is nice to have other people that are working on these issues with you. It makes you feel a little bit like a lone soldier out there. So talk it up. Tell people about these things. Join your local SSMA. I'm highlighting the South Central Invasives Partnership. I started that when I was working at my previous job. So kind of a little shout out to Skip, but maybe you're in Milwaukee and you want to go with CWISC, or maybe you're all the way up in the North Country and you go with the Northwoods CWMA. That's the Cooperative Weed Management Area. So meet your fellow nature enthusiasts and learn some cool stuff from them. Got a deep dive here into something that's right in our own backyards, and this is something from our man VJ down in Racine, Kenosha area. He made this presentation about the tree of heaven. I'm going to blast through this pretty quick, but I do want to discuss it. So we've got this new plant coming in. It is something that's called the stink tree, the lacquer tree. It is also, you can see that on the left there, has this very, very, very tall and beautiful flowers. It is definitely in our region, though it's a bit spread out for how it's going to actually interact with our work. So it's also the preferred host for the spotted lanternfly, which is an upcoming invasive species that we're going to be seeing in our state. So we want to know for that reason too. So I work with insects, and we're going to see a spread of these spotted lanternflies. They are a nasty. They're poisonous when they eat the tree of heaven. They have these lacquer chemicals go into their body and make them unpalatable for birds. You can see the spread. It's been around forever. but it's definitely spreading from the East Coast and coming our way. And here's reports of the actual spotted lanternfly itself. We have no reports of this insect in Wisconsin alive, but we get a couple dead reports every year. We think it's probably out there somewhere. And it's a hitchhiker. It will move on trains and the bottom of trucks, and it will lay eggs on things that are inanimate that then move somewhere else and they hatch, and they have a viable population. So you can see that it's been known to work with these. So the Allianthus is the genus of the tree of heaven. They've been around for a long time. We've known about this for a long time, but they're on the rise in America. And this slide is kind of dense, but you can see some examples of the instars coming up. So that red one, that's like kind of the warning signal. It says, "I'm poisonous, don't eat me." And this graph on the right shows you that when the spotted lanternfly is raised on Tree of Heaven, they mature earlier and they get more, therefore more spread and more generations while they're doing their thing. Just without it, they don't do quite as well. So as far as we know, it first came to America in 1784 with this guy, William Hamilton, who was a renowned horticulturalist, and it was a fast-growing shade tree. But they call it Tree of Heaven because it grows very, very fast. It reaches to the sky. So it became a metropolitan tree and was really something that was going to be considered important for people planting. It was pretty cheap. You could buy a couple pounds of seeds just for $2.50. And of course, this is way back in the day in 1880. So we actually do have lists of it in Wisconsin. This is from the Milwaukee Sentinel and St. Francis Nursery. So it came to Wisconsin. It was possible to buy, and it was planted along the roadsides. So here's some examples of the pressed leaves and some of the flowers coming off of it. However, we had the wisdom, our Street and Park Trees Commission, the committee here, also commissioners, of course, they said, don't plant this tree. It is stinky. It is not very strong. It is not recommended, and especially when it's going to pollen in this time of year, in the summer, it smells really, really bad. So we don't necessarily recommend that for your stuff, for your roadsides. Now, also, this is worth noting that this plant is restricted, so it is not mandated for control. But you can see how it's taken. It grows really, really well on these sort of crunchy sides of buildings and cracks in the pavement and whatnot. In fact, you can do some pretty serious stuff as long as it has sun. So here's Kenosha. You can see some examples of it as it spreads. That's lines, parking lots, and yeah, it's pretty bad. It gets really tall. It's kind of pretty, honestly, but it does stink. All right, so it has a male and a female tree. Here's just some quick facts for you about how long it lives. Not very long. So for a plant, you'd like to have a longer roadside. But I guess with our ash and our elms also dying off, so you can see why you might try the things, but don't plant this one. It's illegal. It also does sprout up very quickly from clones. And I have some in my backyard that has gone from across the river, under the river, and now it has a hole. Now it has 2 spots in both sides of my backyard. So I take care of it when I can, but I don't always have access to every site where it can be cloning itself. So you can kind of see where one plant has made this long area. And you can see they're called samaras. These really beautiful flowers from the sky. So here's a picture. They have this brilliant orange-yellow look to them, kind of fiery looking. 5-year seed viability. Also, when you are treating things, we don't necessarily, if you just cut it, it'll grow right back. It does not really care. So even fire, things like that, don't take care of it. You have to treat it with herbicides. It's really hard to do it just mechanically. And the bark has all these crazy chemicals, and that's partially what the spotted lanternfly is eating as they are maturing. This slide is showing that when the lanternfly eats a tree of heaven, it makes it more poisonous. So on the left, you're looking at pecks with butter. So is the insect raised on butter? They're very palatable. They're raised on Allianthus, not as much. Same thing on the right. How many shakes and wipes does the bird do? Butter, not many. they're adult raised on that ailanthus. They are making the bird make these unpleasant faces and ticks, and that's compared to willow, which is salix. So proof that our native birds do not like them necessarily, and that their association with tree of heaven increases that unpalatability. We're looking at ID of this one species. Here's a bunch of stuff. You know, I think the heart-shaped scar is really, really big. The samaras are very easy to tell. If you're in your botany lingo, alternate compound. So it's going to be these long leaves. Now they look a lot like butternut or walnut, and also sumac. So they're these compound leaves that are pretty long, and they have this. So they're opposite in how they branch off from the leaflet itself, but they're actually alternate in arrangement from the stem. The most distinctive thing is this little gland down here at the base of each leaflet. There's this little tooth, and it has this little dot that makes the foul-smelling stuff. And then look at that beautiful heart-shaped scar from when they fall off from the last years. So again, that's very distinctive to the species. If you compare this to black walnut, they don't have those teeth, and they have serrated edges, where the tree of heaven has smooth edges. Now they're kind of irregular, but they're not serrated. The tree of heaven is more pithy, where the black walnut has more of a corrugated internal structure. The bark looks like a lot of plants. If you can catch them, the females when they're flowering, it's very easy to see. Here's us using EdMaps as a tool to talk about this thing. So you can see it's on the rise. It's almost like a zone map. So it hasn't quite made it into northern Wisconsin or Minnesota. But if things are getting warmer, it may make its way up there before too long. And the spotted lanternfly is going to be bad for our orchards and our hop growers and our hardwood trees, because the lanternfly will suck the sap and make this kind of sooty, like mush that kind of starts to mildew under the tree. So it's not going to kill them, but they do not like it. We're doing a project to look at more reports in Wisconsin, and we're actually getting some great traction along those lines. So if you see this stuff, please do report it. Quick module on negative data. So we're talking EdMaps, and maybe you would think you had jumping worms in your backyard, but you don't. We like to know that, and it's a really easy way to do it online. Same tools, either the edmaps.org or the desktop version. So when you go in, you log in, you're going to go ahead and click that negative button, and then you say what you didn't see. You can once again go ahead and make all other things. We need to know the date you didn't see it, as well as the area that you checked out. So you can make lines, or you can draw polygons that will show us the area that you surveyed. That's really nice to do. Again, privacy is a possibility, so you don't have to share it with everybody. And you can't put a photo because it's hard to share a photo of nothing, but you can at least add more comments. If you want to do this in the smartphone version, you click that negative survey button. Now on the smartphone version, you can actually click a bunch of different species that you didn't see. So if you're doing a nature walk and you want to talk about all the things you thought you might discover and did not, then you can let us know that way, as well as how long you spent surveying, just so we kind of know, was it a quick walk or did you do like a detailed meander? These are all the different ways that you can do that report, and this also is an example of how EdMaps can work. It's the same for reporting positive infestations. So points, freeforms, or vertices. And upload it, otherwise I'll risk it. All right, so again, a quick kind of roundup here. This QR code will go to my website that has these Tree of Heaven fact sheets. There's YouTube videos, there's publications, there's these tools I mentioned. So check us out there. The examples that we make of these things. So this is my Tree of Heaven fact sheet that I made recently that has more kind of in-depth information, and it's printable. You can share it with your town leaders or whoever it is that you think might care. So I'm proud of this. It's because I do some graphic lab. It's fun. The lab recommends, if you do see this plant, that you're going to have foliar, basal bark, or stem injection is important. Now, if you're asking what does that mean, go to Ren's Lab. Go to the Ren's Lab site and look up our different technique videos. You can learn how to do basal bark, which is just basically chemically drilling the plant from the bottom. Cut surface, which is when you just kind of like, hack and when you cut it off and just paint it or spray it, doesn't work as well because it does like to resprout. So we recommend other techniques. And this is an example again of those fact sheets we made with extensions. We have one there that has, again, non-chemical and chemical control. So thank you to all these folks for helping put this together, and for the University of Georgia for their EdMaps help, for my bug specialists, my boss Mark, who has been leading the charge on this for many years. So also Ann Pierce, who was my predecessor and is now at the Arboretum and helped develop a lot of the tools online. So this is what we want after this training. You're going to get out your gigantic tablet at the construction site, and you're going to go over there and report these things or look them up and say, how do I control this? What can I do? So, hey fellas, let's report that big old trail of heaven over there by the trucks. So, thank you for your time. Thanks for hanging out for about 50 minutes here with me. I am available for a call. This goes to my cell phone. This is my office number, but it does forward. Drop me an email with questions. You can send me pictures and requests for identification and control. Ideally, you look it up yourself a bit, but we are here to help. We make the resources. We can explain these resources. So reach out as needed. And with that, take those questions online. This is a video. But thank you again for your time, and I'll see you in the trail.